By show of hands, and I think I can see there's a lot of light there, but by show of hands, can you give me an idea as to how many of you are from the business side of data security, data compliance? 1, 2. Okay, cool. And how many of you, I would assume the rest, are from the technology and the technical side of setting up data right for your organizations? Okay, cool. So we have all the data people here, looks like, right? So, so here's what we want to do today. It's one of our critical launches that happened earlier this week. But what drives it? Most customers, as they started moving from on-premise to AWS or any other cloud platform, I'm sure the same thing would have happened, is the notion of security that was confined to the perimeter and the whole idea of firewall. There's been a lot of projects around the world to secure organizations around the perimeter. But once they started moving to the cloud, security had to be addressed at the core where they had the data. So there are multiple things that you've heard of. We are probably not going to be able to talk about all of those and what AWS is doing in each one of those areas. But one important thing that kept coming back is organizations coming to us, like Bristol Myers Squibb, which is a large life sciences and pharmaceuticals company and a thought leader in research, asking us, what is it that AWS can do for us from a compliance standpoint whereby we can get more speed to science, faster, accelerate innovation to then serve the patients worldwide. Likewise, there were several other companies, and Jamie is going to talk about a few of them later in the presentation, and I'll introduce Jamie in a couple of minutes. So we actually listen to most of these customers. So what we are doing today is introducing this notion of data residency. It's a capability that offers you an ability to keep the data stored in a specific geographical location, and all the processing happens there. So welcome to this data residency session, and my name is Kaushik Mohanty. I try to help our customers embarked on the AWS journey with management and governance, making sure that they are comfortable with all that AWS brings to the table as customers adopt the cloud. Joining me is Jamie St. Ange. She heads product management for Control Tower, and the service that we would be pivoting our discussion off of today is going to be Control Tower. And we also have a customer guest speaker, Chuck Chemis, and he's from Symetra. He's a principal cloud architect, has been working on AWS since 2012. He's going to bring some interesting perspectives on how Symetra, what kinds of challenges Symetra faces from a data residency standpoint, and how they are addressing it, and how he sees these new set of guardrails addressing some of those challenges. Okay. So this is the agenda that we have for today. Essentially, we'll elaborate a little more on data residency and why it matters to you. We'll talk about getting started with Control Tower. Just in case you've not experienced Control Tower, I would really like you to get a feel for what is it. And it's a very high level. We'll cover that. We'll always be available for Q&A towards the latter part of this meeting. I'm sorry I lost my voice last night. But can I get a sense of how many of you have played around with Control Tower or deployed Control Tower by show of hands? Okay, got it, thanks. So I think that part of the presentation, if it's not adequate, please do let us know, and Jamie and I can address that after the presentation. And then we'll be talking about the core of the session, which is all to do with applying data residency controls for the regulated industry space. And what are those controls today? I mean, let's talk of them as guardrails as against controls. Controls is a very broad term. And we'll leave a few things for you after showing you a little demo as to how you can enable data residency if you've deployed Control Tower in your organization. Okay, so what is data residency? Essentially, it's not about just keeping data in a specific geographic location. It's also to do with processing of the data, all confined to that location. In the context of AWS, a geographic location will be AWS region, one or more AWS regions. So essentially, keeping data stored and processed in one or more AWS, specific AWS regions is what data residency is all about. And what is data? Data here comprises images, text, video, audio clips, anything that you are today running either in an AWS account or something that you intend to eventually go into AWS, but you want to plan from a data residency standpoint. So today it may be outside, so it will be scope of AWS for AWS data residency, but you won't be able to apply guardrails to it because it is outside of the AWS. But if you're planning to move into AWS, you might want to start thinking about data encompassing those as well. So that's the what aspect of data residency. Now, who is getting impacted with data residency? Organizations in the regulated industry space, public sector customers who public sector organizations who deal with a lot of personal identifiable information, PII, or personal health information. Likewise, healthcare companies, financial services companies in the regulated industry space, as well as multinational companies, because a lot of companies want to take advantage of working in more favorable tax regimes, and they have to abide by certain mandates in terms of how much of their work can happen there, how much of the data, and what kind of data can reside in those countries vis-a-vis the other countries where they operate. In essence, it is part of modern data strategy, data residency. So there are several initiatives. So one would ask us, okay, tell us what else is happening in AWS. You know, what is the Uber strategy that AWS has when it gets to data, be it data privacy, be it data protection, data security? What all is AWS doing with regard to that? There are multiple such initiatives. But essentially, all of those are underpinned by the fact that AWS aspires to be the most secure cloud platform for data. So this is one of those initiatives in that direction. So the data compliance landscape, if you look at what is driving data residency requirements, regulatory requirements, organizations are driven by certain mandates, and they need to follow those. Public sector bodies predominantly are the ones who get driven by those, healthcare, life sciences, financial services space. Contractual requirements works both ways. Like you have organizations that have customers and they have vendors. So there would be certain contractual requirements in terms of how they handle the data. That is another driver. And then corporate policies, like the one I was talking about. If an organization wants to have business globally and wants to take advantage of certain more favorable tax regimes, they need to make sure that they are abiding by some of those jurisdictions and laws as applicable to those countries. Now comes the interesting part. What are the challenges? What is it that we are talking about today? Why is data residency seen as very complex? And that very aspect in itself makes data residency complex, because it is very complex to understand as to what different countries across the globe, what European Union is looking for from a GDPR compliance standpoint, what Canadian government or Australian government, these are countries that have data residency requirements, are looking for. So understanding the data residency requirements in itself is a mammoth task. That is something that we've heard from our customers off and on. The second thing is, once you've understood it, how does that apply to all the AWS services that they use? Individual services is another aspect of complexity that customers deal with. So we will be talking about a layer of abstraction or orchestration that sits on top of several such services and some mechanisms that will enforce all those guardrails that you want to enforce from a data residency standpoint in a very, very easy to use manner, easy to decipher manner, as well as in an expedited way, in minutes. So the complexity essentially leads to the complication in terms of solving those problems, right? So it is, we are trying to, again, make sure that when we are building these kinds of guardrails, they have an implication on a broader spectrum of services. Because today, you will deploy, let's say, Control Tower, which is something I'll get to you in a minute, which is all to do with basically setting up a multi-account environment with governance. And if you set that up today, you are taking care of several such underlying services. And when those change, or there are implications that impact those services, as a customer, you want to make sure that you are taken care, and there aren't any drifts that you have to manage with. There aren't any manual interventions that you need. And that's what we try to do when we are talking about helping customers with the implementation aspect. So implementation is time-consuming, takes a lot of effort. So we try to do this within a managed service here, because Control Tower is a managed service. So it obfuscates the customers from a lot of complexity that lies in each one of those services. And of course, the project delays associated with this fear of unknown, associated with falling out of compliance from a data residency standpoint, has led to several such projects getting scrapped, because customers didn't really want to go there. So there's been a huge challenge there. So very quickly, for those who are not familiar with Control Tower, I just wanted to bring this up. Control Tower is AWS's recommended way for setting up a multi-account environment with governance. Not only for new accounts or new customers, but also for existing customers. We would like customers to take advantage of the robust policy enforcement guardrails that we've built, and the best practices that is incorporated in everything that we do with Control Tower. Not only that, we also want to make sure that you get the fact that what is governance, first of all, right? I mean, it can mean many things to many people. So we're talking about security, compliance, standardization, essentially, when we talk about governance. Now, what Control Tower takes care of is three broad things. One is being able to automate your account setup. And you can spin up accounts in 30 minutes. And you can initialize and set up a landing zone, which is what Control Tower creates, in 60 to 90 minutes. And then you can apply certain policy enforcement guardrails on top of those accounts and the organization units they roll up to. So Control Tower essentially gives you that ability to set up accounts at a rapid pace in a standardized, compliant, well-architected manner. It helps you drive enforcement of certain policies through guardrails, and then it makes all of that available to you via dashboard in terms of how various accounts and organization units are staying compliant or falling out of compliance. And not only at an account level, it also does that at a resource level, every resource that is spun by Control Tower. So for the technical folks, double-click on Control Tower. The reason I wanted to bring this up is the fact that it orchestrates about 14 different services and makes it simple for you to deploy a multi-account environment, right? And with governance, like I was saying. And how does it happen now? Obviously, there has to be something that's going under the hood of Control Tower. So the account provisioning, standardization, deployment with all the best practices happens through Service Catalog, which is one of AWS services, again, in the management and governance space. The accounts get organized, assigned to organization units, and as of last few days, you could go up to 5 levels deep because we support nested OUs in Control Tower. So they get assigned to the organization units, and on the organization units, you apply service control policies, and they cascade down to the accounts. You can also apply config rules, which essentially offers detective guardrails, and we'll be covering that later. And it obviously gives you a framework for a single sign-on for identity and federated access, and an ability to set up some core accounts and some custom accounts, which is sandbox accounts that you see over there. So with that, to tell a little more about how Symmetra's experience has been with data residency, I'll invite Chuck to come and say a few things.
Good afternoon. Let me get set up here. So Symmetra, we're a financial services company. We're based out of Bellevue, Washington. And our parent company is Sumitomo Life in Japan. We've been in business for more than 60 years, and we have over $50 billion in assets. And the types of products that we offer are annuities, life insurance, both individual and group disability, or life products as well as disability products. We'll talk next about our cloud model. And so when we first started our cloud journey about 3.5 years ago, we built landing zones. We had maybe 20, 25 different scripts that helped us kind of build our account structures. We actually struggled a lot with trying to maintain or prevent drift, and then keep consistency across all of our accounts. When Control Tower became available, we actually migrated our accounts into that, and today all of our accounts are under the control of Control Tower. So the structure that I have on the left really is the kind of blueprint for Control Tower, and in our case, we follow those models, and I want to talk a little bit about our connectivity hub, which is what we call our tier 0 account, but this is where we bring in our direct connects, our transit gateway, and how we talk to our accounts through this. So we run a hub and spoke model, and through Control Tower, we've provisioned different accounts that I call operating models, and we have really 3 sets of those. So the first one is really for EC2-based workloads, RDS, things that require agents, things that require patching. And we monitor those with certain tool sets because we have to vulnerability scan these environments and the like. Also, as part of our digital strategy, we started building serverless types of applications. And we found that we needed some different structures for that. So that's what we call our cloud native. And then finally, we, as an insurance provider, we also have to maintain HIPAA compliance. And so we have some very specific controls around data and how we protect that data. So this is where we started at. And then what we found is that as we tried to move forward and fitting different applications or groups of applications into this model, that it also caused some other types of problems. So what we did with that is we said, you know what? Why don't we take these accounts, wall them off, and we actually call them walled garden or product accounts, then we can focus our accounts specifically to the needs of that business line or that group of developers that are actually building those applications. So I'll just lay out a couple of those types of accounts. And for provisioning these, what's really cool about what we've done is we use Resource Access Manager, and we don't have to build any infrastructure for that. So we actually just share resources out of one of the operating models. So from a VPC standpoint, all of our VPCs live in one of those different operating models down at the bottom. And then the accounts up on top actually get to leverage those resources, the subnets, other types of services that we provide there. We provision those using the Control Tower Account Factory, and then we've layered a bunch of all of our customizations on top of that to what we call our account vending machine. So let's talk about data residency a little bit. So we're operating in a highly regulated industry, and we have to meet requirements at both the federal level and at all of the individual 50 state level. So all of our data has to stay within the US as part of those regulatory requirements. And I can show you, you can see on the bottom, we have different types of data. So we have policy data, PII, EPHI, and financial data. We also, as part of our maintaining our compliance, we have to meet the controls and the frameworks defined by HIPAA as well as ISO, and then also demonstrate our internal control over financial reporting. So let's talk a little bit about guardrails and how we do it today. So we monitor feeds. Does AWS announce a new region? So we monitor these feeds. When a new region comes available, we need to manually go in and run our scripts against I think we have 30 accounts now. Okay? Some of the work that we have to do is disable STS from issuing any security tokens to those endpoints, because we try to blank out and wipe out all of those regions so we have no activity coming from them. As many of you know, when AWS releases a new region, they also build the default VPC. So we undo the default VPC. And then the other thing that we need to do for all of our accounts is enable, for all of those new regions, we need to enable all of the managed services like Macie, GuardDuty, Config, et cetera, so that we actually have eyes and protections on those regions as it relates to our 28 or 30 accounts. So the reason why we have to do this is when we started this, we didn't have cloud-native controls that could just eliminate those regions for us. We also found that our service link roles, including Control Tower, which has service link roles, can work outside of that. So while we put SCPs to try to block that, it doesn't fully span all of that. And then what we're really trying to do is to prevent our internal builders from actually deploying resources into regions that we didn't want services deployed in. So what we did with that is we talked to our account team and we said, is there a way that we can do something different with this? And so they connected us to the product team, and the product team's engaged with us. We talked about through our requirements. We actually talked to some researchers as well. And so our team spent a fair amount of time describing what our needs were. And what I really want to say here is that, and part of what's brought us here today, is that AWS listened. And part of what we asked for was, can you just give us a checkbox? Can you give us the easy button that just takes care of this? And the process of doing that for us is that it allows our builders to focus really on business differentiating value versus just trying to maintain some of these compliance issues. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Jamie to kind of talk about how AWS is going to help us get this easy button.
Ooh, that light is bright. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie, as Kaushik mentioned. I'm the product leader for Control Tower. And since I saw a good show of hands of a few folks in here, probably about half the room that aren't familiar with Control Tower, I do want to spend just a little bit of time going a little bit high level on Control Tower for you, just to get some of the core concepts across before we get into the data residency guardrails and the demo portion of it. So as Kaushik mentioned, Control Tower is an easy button for starting your multi-account environment, which we also refer to as a landing zone. You'll hear landing zone quite commonly instead of multi-account environment across AWS. A little correction to what Kaushik said, we've gotten performance improvements out this year, and we can now set up your multi-account environment in less than 30 minutes. This is huge. This is something that's was originally taking customers not minutes, not hours, but we're talking days. Setting up your multi-account environment, it sets up your OU structure, following AWS best practices. It also puts logging in place across your organization and all of the organizational units that you build into your landing zone, and then all of the accounts that go into that. So it sets up your multi-account environment known as your landing zone. It provides you, as Chuck mentioned, with the ability to automate account provisioning. Right now, we automate account provisioning. It's taking us about 40 minutes to provision an account, which might seem high. Yes, you can go to other services like AWS organizations, which Control Tower does heavily leverage for account vending, as well as Service Catalog, and set up your accounts in minutes. But what's happening with Control Tower is we're applying all of the AWS best practices in that provisioning lifecycle, and that takes some time. So we're not just giving you a vanilla account, we're applying our best practice configurations into those accounts as they get provisioned. And then the third concept with Control Tower that we have is the notion of guardrails, also known as controls. You can think of guardrails are just preventative controls or detective controls. We apply, at landing zone setup time, we apply mandatory guardrails that are all about keeping your landing zone in compliance with AWS best practices for managing multi-account environment. And then we also provide optional guardrails that you can then apply on your own at an OU level or organizational unit level to increase your security and compliance posture. And then we do the account vending as well, as I mentioned. This is just a little visualization of kind of what's going on under the hood in Control Tower. And why we keep stressing that it orchestrates multiple AWS services is because we, like you, are a customer of those services. We run into some of the same challenges or opportunities that you might run into when you think about orchestrating across the services, but we try to make that easier for you. We try to continuously be that easy button on top of AWS that takes those AWS building blocks and puts them into a managed service that we can orchestrate and manage for you. With guardrails in particular, what's happening under the hood here is we're leveraging AWS Service Control Policies, or SCPs, for preventive guardrails, and we're leveraging config rules for detective guardrails. So we manage all of that behind the scenes. You simply go into the console, which I'll show you in the demo here in a little bit, to enable those guardrails, and we handle the SCPs for you. We optimize the SCPs, and we also handle the deployment and management of the config rules as well. Okay, what we were trying to solve for with data residency is giving you that easy button from a control perspective, giving you some pre-built AWS managed controls that will help you solve for data residency. And what I mean by AWS managed controls, we hear a lot from customers that it takes them days and weeks and sometimes even years, or they have years of backlogs on how to build controls in AWS to make sure that their data is secure and that their data is only being stored and processed in the regions or locations that they want it to be stored and processed. So with the managed controls or guardrails that we provide in Control Tower, we're taking that burden away from you. We're shifting the shared responsibility model a little bit. Instead of saying, hey, as a customer, shared responsibility is, that's on you to define those controls. We want to do that for you. We also understand that it can be quite burdensome to keep up with the pace of innovation for AWS. And so as AWS is constantly changing, your controls have to constantly change to keep up with that pace as well. And so we want to do that for you and give you the capability to have that easy button for controls so that you can focus more on modernization. You can focus more on doing things that really support your business versus trying to protect your data or trying to be in compliant with the laundry list of compliance frameworks that we all have to deal with. So for data residency, what we've done is we've deployed 4 new preventive controls. Again, those are SCPs that you can apply for each individual organizational unit or at the Uber organizational level in your multi-account environment. And then for each preventive control, we have complementary detective controls. We always want to take the approach that we want to trust with preventive, but we also want to verify with detective. Again, these are optional controls, so you can deploy them on your own, and you can pick and choose which ones that you want to deploy. Then in the Control Tower dashboard, especially for those of you that have not seen Control Tower yet, we try to provide you an aggregated view in the dashboard of not only what guardrails that you've got deployed, but also your compliance status to those guardrails. Okay. So I'm just going to quick through, a little demo here. And pardon me, but the demo is a little hard to see there. Okay, so I'll walk you through a demo here. What's going to happen in the demo that starts? Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is the Control Tower console. Essentially, we're logged into Control Tower here. As you can see, we went to our guardrails page, navigated to guardrails on the left-hand side, and we're just going to filter for all of the data residency guardrails. Just put a search in here, and you can see all of the guardrails pop up. You can see that they are noted as elective guardrails because they're optional. We don't deploy them on your behalf. You need to do that. They're categorized, and then also you can tell which ones are detective versus preventative. So we're going to start with region deny. Region deny is not only important for data residency, but it also helps you control your AWS footprint, right? So whether you're concerned about data residency or costs, region deny helps you control where your end users can deploy resources. So it helps you control your AWS footprint overall. With region deny, this is a preventive control or preventive guardrail that gets applied at the organization level. So this one's going to look a little bit different from one that you would deploy just directly out of the Control Tower guardrail library, because we actually need to go to the landing zone settings page. So I'll let this play here for a second. We'll get here. Oops. Did we stop there? Okay, so here we went into the region deny preventive guardrail. Any guardrail in the guardrail library, you can click on it and it's going to go to your guardrail detail page, and that's really going to give you more information about the guardrail itself, what the intended behavior is, when it was released, if you've got it applied to any organizational units today. So here we can see we got that, and now for region deny, we're going to go to the landing zone settings page. And I apologize, I need to just move this so I can actually not restart the demo every time. So here in your landing zone settings page, what we want to show you is that region deny here in the upper box, you can see is not enabled. So we will click through enabling that. So you can see the region deny is not enabled. You're going to modify your landing zone settings. And it's going to give you a bunch of information on the screen to modify your settings. And that looks busy. Why does that look busy? From a customer experience standpoint, definitely not something you want to see a console with a bunch of language in it, but region deny is super important. And it's super important you understand how it works and you understand how it interacts with all of the AWS services, because we do have some services, IAM is a key service, that are global in nature. They're not regionalized yet. And so we want to make sure that you understand when you're applying region deny that you're not denying global services. And we have had customers that have tried to do region deny on their own and ended up locking them out of their entire AWS account because they denied IAM and couldn't get in. So on the screen, you'll just see the disclosures about region deny, how it works, and disclosures about the global services that it will not pertain to. And then here you can see we're just going to walk through enabling that. So we clicked on enable. We clicked on update landing zone. Now what's happening here is it's going to deny all regions that you do not have selected for control tower governance. So it is an allow list approach. It is not an opt-out. You are opting in, per se. So on the screen, you can see we're going to configure a landing zone. The following regions are in a status of governed. So those are the regions that your end users can deploy resources into, and anything that's not in a status of governed will be denied from a region perspective. And this includes regions that Control Tower is not in today. So we are currently in 15 regions, and we're growing. We will continue to grow in 2022 from a regional footprint. But if Control Tower is not in that region, it will deny access to that region as well. So it's super important that you understand that, and that's part of the user experience overall. So here we're going to implement region deny. And now we can see that the landing zone was updated, and region deny guardrails are set. We're going to go back to the AWS console. We're going to check out EC2 and do an API call to show you what it looks like now that region deny is in place from a different service perspective. So here we're going to go out to EC2. And we can see right now this account is in the North California region, which is not governed at this point from a control tower perspective. So by implementing region deny, we, and I will get to questions at the end, I'm sorry, so I see you raising your hand, we'll go back at the end. You can see on this screen then by implementing region deny, we're not governing in control towers, so you did not, that's not allow listed from a region perspective, and you can see all of the EC2 APIs are blocked because that region is blocked. Versus here, when we look at North Virginia, which is governed, you can see you have everything's working fine for North Virginia because it's governed and it's not denied by any of the other regions. The other example that we're going to walk through is the detective guardrail. So we're going to go back to the guardrail library here, go back to our data residency controls, select our detective guardrail for S3. Go, same guardrail page. And now we're going to enable that guardrail on an OU. And I'm just going to pause here for a second. This is another enhancement that we did this year for you existing Control Tower customers. And we do have concurrent detective guardrails now. So in this example, it's only selecting one guardrail, and it's going to apply it to one OU. But you can select multiple guardrails and apply them to one OU at a time. If you want to go deploy all of the detective guardrails for data residency, you would go in, select them all, and then go select the OU that you want to apply it to. You don't need to go one by one. So we're just going to apply this to the core count. And you can see the guardrail was enabled at the top there. Okay. All right, so two different ways to do guardrails with data residency, region deny being one of the most requested ways to deny data getting into regions you don't want to go into, followed on some other preventive guardrails, and I'll pop them up at the end on the screen as well so we can take a look at those, and then all of the 13 detective guardrails to help you detect in case that a preventive guardrail fails. Okay, and before I open it up for questions, as Chuck mentioned, we do love working with our customers. It's core to our beliefs that Amazon is working backwards from our customers, and we partnered with several customers and partners to define our first set of data residency guardrails, so just a special thanks to them. But let's go ahead. We've got plenty of time for some Q&A, and I'm just going to invite Kaushik and Chuck back up here to support for Q&A. But I know you've back here got your hand raised. Yeah, so I think the question was, what does region deny do in regards to CloudFront? Yes. It does not deny CloudFront across those regions. Those are that's one of the global services that you will need to go and configure your settings in. see if we can go back. Oh, in the console? Yeah. I'm not going to be able, I won't be able to click it open because the demo's pre-recorded, unfortunately. Oh, yes, yep. So that one will prevent, that will put that won't happen with region deny, that happens with that preventive guardrail. It should just work with this SCP, this preventive guardrail. You shouldn't have to go reconfigure that on CloudFront itself. So here with this one, the disallow cross. Mm-hmm. You're still going to want to check your CloudFront settings because it depends on where you put it, if you're putting it at your organizational unit level or your OU level. So you're still going to want to go in CloudFront and verify those settings. Okay, okay. Questions over here?
Let's say I want to manage the configuration control tower in cyber control system like this. Is it possible to set up control tower by a cloud formation, Terraform, or any other tool?
So the question was, how can you manage your control tower, so your landing zone setup and configuration outside of the console, basically, is what you're asking me. Can you do it through APIs or CloudFormation or Terraform? Not yet. We did just release this week account provisioning with Terraform. So once your control tower is set up, you can use Account Factory with Terraform. We will continue to partner with HashiCorp on Terraform support and hoping to get to broaden that in 2022. We'll also be working on APIs in CloudFormation and CDK support as well. So right now it's in the console. You need to go through the AWS console to implement your initial landing zone. And then you can use, like I said, account provisioning can be done through Terraform now.
Thank you very much. So it is planned that, so it's planned that with control tower there will be a support to CloudFormation.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yep, absolutely. I think there was one question back here as well.
Do you have a region deny configuration, separate configuration for two different accounts? So my European business, I want to just deny anything outside of the EU, but my US business account, I want to deny anything.
Right, you cannot do it on an account level by account level basis right now. Our first implementation is at the organizational level, right? So it's going to apply it across all of your OUs. We eventually want to get to OU by OU level and then account level, but right now it's across the entire landing zone.
Okay, and then a second question. So I set up all my accounts through the organization and then use control tower. Well, do you need to just have control tower right time zones or fine with that kind?
Yeah, actually in January this past year, we launched better extending governance features. So you can extend control tower governance into an existing AWS organization today, and then you can update those accounts as well. The one thing that you got to work through is just how logging is set up, because control tower does establish your logging at an organizational level. At this point, we can't consume an existing log, but that's coming in the very near future. But you can go in and extend governance. Also, if you're already in a control tower environment and you want to use AWS organizations to provision account, to set up an account, you can set it up through organizations and then go into the control tower console and enroll it into control tower. Mm-hmm. Oh, right there, one more.
Question about control tower ability to close accounts and to wipe accounts.
Okay, say one more time, I'm sorry, I could not hear you.
Question about control tower ability to close accounts and to wipe over the existing accounts.
Go Go ahead. I've been doing a lot of talking. You can tell my voice is starting to quit.
The question is on Control Tower's ability to close accounts and wipe accounts. I got that right? Okay. So the way we go about doing it with Control Tower isn't any different from the way accounts can be wiped. Right? There is no concept of nuking accounts in AWS. The way we do it in Control Tower, though, offers you certain guidance in terms of how you may want to handle it. Like Control Tower has something called a suspended OU, right? What typically is done with the suspended OU is you move those accounts that you eventually want to, kind of close, and you move it in there because it takes about 90 days, 60 to 90 days for accounts to get,
Terminate.
Yeah, to terminate the account. So what we advise our customers is do that. You can do that with Control Tower by having a separate OU carved out, right? Otherwise, it gets a little unmanageable as to what's going on with that account, right, sitting out there, which you really don't want to use.
You can use the organizations delete accounts as well. It's basically the same process because we rely on those underlying services. And Kaushik said you go in and delete the account. It does take about 60 days to term.
Yeah.
We recommend putting it in a different OU just so you can track what you are trying to terminate a little bit better. Okay,
And you can apply the guardrails on that OU in such a way that nothing happens, no resource consumption or additional charges occur because of those accounts being there.
Yep. I think we have a question here in the front.
Yes, so my question was going back to somebody asked it over here with the Control Tower not being able to set different parameters, like, okay, in this OU, I want to set only European access, and over here I only want North American access. So you're saying we can't do that in Control Tower?
You can, but you're going to do that with a custom guardrail that you build. The region deny guardrail that we just launched right now, and I just want to preface right now, we all know what MVPs are, right? Right now it's set at the organizational level, so it's across all of your OUs in the landing zone. It's not OU by OU.
One way to look at it is, okay, can you put two organizations in there, like two management accounts, and then have the other organization take care of the other needs that you have, but otherwise that limitation is there.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I was thinking of, setting it at like an OU level, and I know you can set an SP at an OU level. And
You can.
That can affect those accounts.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, with this, we can just specify, I want this particular level to reach this. But
Yep.
you're saying this is, everything rolls downhill.
To the top node, yeah.
Right. So the question, if you can't hear the conversation, is about applying the region deny at an organization level across the entire organization or across the entire landing zone or individual organizational units. And right now, when you do it, it's applied across the entire landing zone.
So even before data residency guardrails, what got launched 2 days back, customers in a multinational setup have had multiple management accounts, pair accounts. And then you have one-on-one, 1:1 ratio between Control Tower and the management account, right? And you can repurpose or purpose them in such a way that they take care of different geographical requirements. A lot of multinational companies use us in that particular way.
I'm trying to get where you want to go. We'll get there with you.
Oh, I also have another question on that, if I may. So let's say I'm moving on to Control Tower and I set this and I say, okay, I only want to be in US 1, US 2, but I totally space out that I was building a new application in Cape Town. And I set my guardrail saying, ixnay, no more API calls. What happens to my resources?
What we recommend that you do there is go apply detective controls first. Go in and apply the detective controls that's going to show you where you've got your resources running, or look at other AWS services that also give you that view of where you've got your resources running. I'm not doing a validation check that surfaces to you when we do region deny to say, hey, don't deny this region, you've got something running in it. So we recommend that you go apply the detective first to identify where you've got resources running before you deny the region. Okay. Any other questions?
So our VPCs, let me start there first. So our VPCs all are stamped out to the same pattern. Okay? And then from an internal as well as external audit, we have to apply different control frameworks that we measure against. And so that's why we structured them in that way. And so like I think if you remember from my talk, we have ISO 27000 across all of them. And then in our HIPAA account, or our protected account, we have additional specific things that we have to deploy in there. So for per account, which contains the VPC. So the operating models indicate that, I mean, they all have a VPC. They connect to our hub, which is where all of our transit gateway and all that lives. So all of that routing is in place. Okay, and then we do deploy workloads in there in each one. So for example, I'll just use the HIPAA again. Some of the resources that we put in there, because of, like, say, a HIPAA rule is we use FSX, we have to maintain 2 identical copies of data. So within that VPC and the workload that the HIPAA-related workloads, we'll do a multi-AZ, and then we'll configure FSX so that it shares to both of those availability zones. And that's how we maintain those 2 copies of data. The other accounts don't have that requirement. And then when we go to the walled garden accounts, which are those product accounts, for example, one of our life accounts actually needs very specific things for that. So that's where we'll connect that into and share out resources via that particular operating model, which contains the VPCs that has these various services.
I'm just looking for any more questions, sorry.
Is there a question? Okay, sorry.
No? No more questions? Yep. No, you can't. You've got to, if you have an existing organization set up, you can extend control tower governance to that existing organization. So you don't have to go recreate a new one. You can extend governance over into that one, and then you can apply the controls, if it's region deny, through the landing zone settings or the guardrail library for the other controls. Correct. The question, and I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to repeat the questions so everybody can hear. The question was, are there any underlying things that need to exist in the account to be able to do that? There are not. We do pre-checks on the organization to make sure that we can do certain things through the extended governance process. And we document, that's all available in the user guide in regards to what those pre-checks are. But we set up the logging for you. You don't have to already have it set up. We'll deploy everything into the existing organization when you extend governance. Yeah, okay. Just one
Say that
question
again.
here.
Sorry?
I'm saying it's better to work on this situation is the same way AWS, then we will check it.
Oh, it just depends on what you've got going in that organization already. But yes, we try to provide a lot of guidance on doing the extended governance piece, or if you were on the AWS landing zone before it became a managed service, we do have some guidance on transitioning and. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
If it makes sense, look at it this way. Control Tower started for greenfield customers, setting up a new landing zone afresh, and then spinning up accounts. We waited to make sure that the service was being received very well, and we were getting feedback from the customer. And then we started enrolling accounts first. Accounts which were outside of Control Tower, but in the same organization, into Control Tower. Then what Jamie was explaining, OU by OU enrollment happened, and bulk enrollment of accounts happened. We do pre-checks like she was talking about, as well as you can apply config conformance pack checks so that you can identify if there is any conflicting guardrail that might have been deployed as a config rule before in the pre-existing accounts, and then you can resolve those conflicts just in case there is one. And now the whole thing is, as I was talking about, there is support for nested OUs. So the ability to offer what you can get with AWS organization within Control Tower has become a lot more profound.
A lot more seamless now, for sure. I see a question here.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm just laughing because Kaushik is public sector and has been beating me up on GovCloud and FedRAMP for a long time. So yes, that is in our plans.
So yeah, so FedRAMP mod it's already compliant with FedRAMP mod. So a lot of regulatory industries as well as the federal FinServ, for example, regulatory space, they use Control Tower because they get the federal FedRAMP moderate. The other part is something that we can have a conversation on in terms of roadmap under an NDA, probably as a sidebar thing.
Yep.
So.
Any other questions? Awesome. I really appreciate everybody coming today. I know it's day 4 of reInvent, and if you're like me, you're all exhausted at this point. I hope everybody enjoyed the session. Our emails are on the screen.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, and hope to see you all at Replay tonight. It's a great way to end the week. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ooh.